doctor and he breaks a gun and can't put it back together. But about once a month, for the last couple of months, we've been doing. My name is Laris. Oh, good God. How's that happening? Hold on. There we go.
Thought you fixed this last time, Ed.
Yeah, you know what happens when you start the stream, it starts playing stuff on their YouTube channel. Sorry about that. Let me start over. Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's Tuesday, usually an episode of Bench Doctor, but tonight, as we've been doing about once a month for the last couple of months, we are going to have an experience panel, and tonight is a veterans experience panel. We did try to collect some questions prior to the panel that our moderators, Danny and Kyle, have in a little worksheet next to them, and they'll be feeding questions to the panelists as we go along. If you have questions, drop them in the Zoom chat. And if you're watching this on one of the live streams, we'll try to comb through the live streams and look for questions. Otherwise, we'll get to them either after the stream itself or we'll try to get to them before the stream ends. So I want to welcome everybody. Lonny Wiseman, a friend of mine, is going to be riding herd on the panel tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to him to introduce our panelists, introduce what he thinks he wants to talk about tonight with them. And without further ado, it's all yours.
Thank you. So for those who joined us, thank you. This is the day before Veterans Day. What a perfect time to have a panel about veterans. So I'll start. I'm Lonny Weissman, and I served in the U.S. Army from 1966 to 1970. We have Ed Smith, who is a former, well, you're never a former Marine. So Ed Smith is a Marine.
Marine till I die.
Yeah. And then we have Nate Tilton. Nate was in the U.S. Army. Will Hancock, U.S. Army. Brian Robinson, Air Force. And Daniel, Navy. So basically, the way this is going to work is, as the little blurb, for those of you who read it, is each and every one of us has a different experience when it comes to firearm ownership. Some of us came to that from our military experience. Some of us came to it before, and some of us came to it after our military experience. Each of us have our own particular reasons for gun ownership. Some of it's just because we just like things that go bang, and some of it's because we feel a need to have it. Either way, there's no right or wrong answer as to why gun ownership exists for veterans. But I think we each have a story, and that story has some to do with our gun ownership, but a lot of it has to do with where we are today, which all of us are sitting here who have identified as liberal or at least left of center. And that's always an interesting contradiction for many people when it comes to gun ownership. So without any further ado, I think I'm just going to go ahead and let's see. We're going to start with Brian, because Brian is actually, is it okay if I tell them you're active? I guess it is. I just did.
Yeah. I'm a reservist. Brian Robinson. I am the Air Force guy, but likely to transition to Space Force as soon as Congress gets their acts together with us reservists. I was active for 12 years, been a reservist for, I think 13 years so far. Yeah, my career field is, surprise, surprise, space operations. It's space stuff. Let's see. As far as me being a gun owner goes, they generally don't let us touch guns. These guys go. I spent most of my career sitting in dark cabinet rooms, looking at screens behind a glass door, guarded by 18-year-olds with guns. So nothing there military. As far as my interests go, well, it's let's say it has to do with the current socio-political environment. So I got started pretty much 4 years ago this month, and here I am. And that's all I got.
Let's go ahead. Will, introduce yourself. Tell us a little about who and what.
Will Hancock. I served from 93 to 96. So I was fortunate to serve during peacetime. I was a combat engineer. So I did get a lot of trigger time, like qualified on damn near everything the Army had at the time, and didn't realize till many years later how fortunate that was, how much fun it was. When I got out of the service, I didn't touch a firearm for a long time, long time. A couple of cowboy guns here and there, a little bit of range time with my dad, but not much. And my path into gun obsession came at my, I got sober in 2008. And at my 1 year sobriety anniversary, my dad gifted me a little Colt single action 22, and that got the whole, like, it just snowballed, and I sort of replaced the addiction hobby with the gun hobby, and got into cowboy action shooting, and then, but it was mostly recreational with a little bit of self-defense kind of here, and then just like Brian said, I got in with both feet about 4 years ago this week. So yeah, likewise, my attitude and mindset about self-defense and Second Amendment radically changed in 2016.
Thanks, Will. Nate?
Hey, how y'all doing? Nate Tilton. I've served in the Army and the Army National Guard. I've been deployed twice to Iraq and twice to Afghanistan. I enlisted into the Army as a POG, which personnel other than grunt, as a 88 mic motor transport operator. However, if y'all know how the military is, it's your GI general issue. So basically the needs of the military. So I found myself quickly not doing any transportation stuff and found myself in infantry units for my first 3 deployments. And I actually really fell in love with a lot of tactics and firearms in that time frame. It was a really interesting experience. And so I picked up a lot of tactical knowledge and know-how, but I started getting into firearms when I became a Federal Air Marshal. And but shortly after getting back from my last deployment in 2012, I had a hard time going back in with firearms because it was a pretty rough deployment. So I didn't touch firearms for a while, and even my job as a Federal Air Marshal, I was questioning my own abilities for a while after I'd gotten back, because I was struggling pretty bad with that. But then in 2016, about like everyone else was saying, I got pretty much, I jumped back into guns, both feet, and started taking different classes, took armoring classes, especially with Sig Sauer or Glock. And so I learned how to work on those weapons a lot. So that became very therapeutic for me, actually working on a lot of different weapons, and it was pretty nice. Like I haven't gotten into reloading yet, but it's definitely on the list of things to do.
Thanks, Nate. So I'm going to insult the hell out of the Marines. You guys are bringing up the ass end. Daniel.
Right? Well, there.
Oh, look at that, man. He's got his little squabby hat.
So I served U.S. Navy 94 to 2000 active, then came back trying to cross rate because my rate was actually being rolled from dental tech into corpsman. Probably would have re-upped if they would have really had that on the radar, but at the time I was just sick of everyone and wanted out. So got out, tried to cross over to photographer's mate, which I work as a photographer now. And 2 times the recruiter, second time was a charm with the recruiter making it happen. Went to combat camera at North Island and didn't stay long enough to make the rate permanent because it took them 3 months to get me a uniform. So I spent 3 drill weekends just hiding because they didn't want me in public. And I wasn't going to spend my own money on a uniform because the Navy could do that. Got out. As far as my relationship with guns, obviously wasn't shooting anybody. I had my Geneva card. And but I grew up in the South. And so we had everything. We had a snake gun for dispatching water moccasins. We had home defense. We had purpose-built guns. So there was never any mystique to it. It was just, they were just fact of life. And as it's been said here, because of politics being what they are, certainly own my fair share, and maybe more as I get them past the wife. But so that's about my end of it. I'm a mouthy liberal, so I have to be armed because I ain't the biggest of dudes.
Okay, Jarhead. I'll let
Right.
you go next. I'll bring up the rear this time.
All right. Hey, Ed Smith. I was into firearms long before I joined the Marine Corps. It's probably why the Marine Corps was, appealed to me, I guess, the most. I wanted to shoot everything, machine guns, grenades, grenade launchers, rocket launchers, all that stuff. And I got to do it. So that was awesome. I served from 1995 to 1999 on active duty. Then I did another 4 years till 2003 in the reserves. I was a helicopter guy. So even as an air wing guy in helicopter units, we got a lot of trigger time on stuff, which is pretty cool. So that was great. But after that, after I got out, I went through a period where I had a few guns here and there, but not very much. Just always had a few in the closet or whatever for, just recreation or protection. And then, then I got married and, went for a while without owning any guns, sold stuff off. But then probably around 2010 or so-ish, I started really getting the bug again and started buying and collecting. And now I'm overwhelmed with everything that I have and just enjoy the sport and the collecting aspect of it, and have a great time shooting and meeting all these awesome people at LGC.
Oh, thank you. So being the old guy in this group, so I probably the first time I ever shot a weapon was I was 13 years old. It was a Winchester 30-30 lever action. And then a Colt 22 Magnum pistol was the other thing. And that kind of lit the fire. I didn't actually start owning guns until after I got out of the service. So when I was discharged in 1970, I served actually 18 months in Vietnam. I was a combat infantry medic. And when I came home, much like many of those of us who served there, and also my family, I was part of the anti-war movement and the radical, I guess one would say the radical left, because I took my military training and started teaching people how to use weapons and to disassemble them and put them back together and take them out and teach them how, teach them basic marksmanship skills, things like that. And then kind of took a break, probably around the mid 70s. I left Los Angeles and kind of went up Northern California and hung out there and didn't really start back with guns until probably 1982. Got very involved in the hard left movement again, and had a pretty good collection going. Then took another break. In round about 2014, I guess it was, I live in California, and as everybody knows, the laws in California started getting a little weird and strange. And I decided that it probably made sense for me to get whatever I could at the time. And then 2016 happened, and I realized that I was really smart, and I had what I had. And I guess when I was in the military, I have to say I enjoyed it. I got probably my favorite weapon to qualify on and train on was a 50 cal machine gun. There is nothing like standing behind that thing, grabbing those two handles, dropping that trigger, and letting that sucker rock and roll. That's all there is to it. If that doesn't excite you about owning guns, nothing will. I guess, yeah, maybe the rocket launcher, but the other one was the M79 grenade launcher was my other favorite one. But I qualified for those who the M16 was not the weapon that I learned how to shoot. I trained on an M14, which is the military version of the M1A1 that Springfield makes. So I schlepped around that 15, 16 pound piece of crap through my basic training and my early part of my military. And then I went to Vietnam. And just before I went to Vietnam, they send you off to jungle training is what they call it. They have a little fake little village that they send you to, and you learn how to basically do all the things you never, ever wind up doing when you're in that place. But I had to qualify with the M16. And it wasn't my carry weapon, actually. I didn't like the one that I had when I was in Vietnam. I found that it was not very reliable. So I picked up an old grease gun, 45 cal grease gun, which they call it a grease gun because it really looks like one of those old handheld squeeze them grease guns. You know,
We still had them.
yeah, they're great. You
Still
know,
had them in the early 90s. Yeah.
yeah. So, you know, the Air Force actually had a model that had a crank lever for cocking it. The earlier models that the Army had, there was just a hole in the bolt. You just pulled the bolt back, it locked it in place. You drop the trigger, and oftentimes it just went on its own after that. It was this big, heavy damn bolt, and it just kind of slammed back and forth. You only had to really pull the trigger once, and you could dump, you know, a 25 round magazine. And if you hit anything, you were really lucky. But the idea wasn't to hit anything. It scared the crap out of anybody that was around it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically, you know, my story. Like I said, I've jumped in and out of gun ownership through most of my life. In the last 6 years, maybe 7, it's pretty much been the thing that I do now. And I do reload, and that's a good thing right about now because there ain't a whole lot of stuff out there. And I find it. I actually find it when I go to the range, it's kind of a Zen thing for me. My mind gets really focused. The rest of the world really isn't that important. And I find that I'm interestingly enough at the range, I have less situational awareness, so to speak. You know, I'm that relaxed that I'm not really worried about what's going on around me, which isn't necessarily the same when I'm walking on the streets or hanging out in places, but that's a whole different story. Anyway, so that's my story. Danny, we got any questions, or are we just gonna go stream of consciousness here?
Hey, before we get started, I think we would be remiss in not wishing a happy 245th birthday to our Marine here. So,
Yeah,
Thank you.
he got mine already. He got
Wow.
mine this morning, but I'll say it again. Happy birthday, Marine.
Thanks.
I have, like, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 former students who are celebrating that birthday today.
All right, we have a
Answers
couple questions if you want to. Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
We have a couple questions if you want to go to that. The first one is those of us who are not veterans, are we supposed to say thank you for your service, or is that faux pas?
Ooh. Ooh, boy, there's a question. Who wants to take that one?
wow. Yeah. I'll take that one. Somebody else can jump in if they want. But that actually kind of makes me cringe because it's become such a trite thing to say. So, I mean, yeah, I guess I appreciate the thought. But at the same time, it's like, you know what? If you want to thank me and thank other veterans, here's a couple things you can do. One, get your kids to at least show some interest in serving, because I'm old. Somebody's got to replace me. And 2, if you know a veteran, ask them their story. Ask them to tell you about their time in service, and you'd be surprised at what you hear. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, for me, it always kind of makes me feel a little bit awkward, but it always seems like it's well intentioned. So I just, hey, thanks, whatever.
Don't you think it for most Americans it relates back to the post-Vietnam or the Vietnam era when so many veterans came back and were not thanked for their service and were spit on and whatnot. And I think as soon as Americans had a chance, as soon as the first 2004 guys were coming back from Iraq, it was like, let's not fuck that up again. Let's do it right this time. And so it was, yeah, maybe people kind of overdo it, but isn't that better?
Yeah.
When it's coming from a good place. I don't know.
I'm going to let you guys all say what you're going to say because my take is a little different. What do you think, Nate? Did we lose Nate? There you go.
No, I'm here. Yeah. Honestly, like personally, I'm with Brian on this one. It's definitely something that always makes me cringe. Like, especially like when you're first starting out and you're coming back from basic in AIT and you're in your greens or blues or whatever they have now. And, people are walking up, thank you for your service. Or even when you're deploying to Iraq or Afghanistan, it's like people that come up and they say, oh, let me buy your lunch. Let me buy your dinner. And it's not that we're ungrateful, but it's like, it almost makes you feel like, I'm gonna say that you feel like you're an imposter, but you almost feel like you're an imposter. It's like, hey, look, I'm just doing my job, but thank you. It's like we appreciate that you support us, but at the same time, it definitely, I agree with Brian though. It definitely makes you cringe. But like Will said, it's like it's something that people are trying not to mess up like they did before, and I do agree with that. But at the same time, it's like I know a lot of vets definitely they get kind of flustered with it. Like I've gotten to the point now where I'm just like, I don't want to say numb to it, but I'm just like, hey, thank you, and I just say thank you and we appreciate your support and things like that. And I try to take it in stride now. But when I was younger, like when I was a private, that was a long time ago now, but when I was a private and would hear stuff like that, it would just, make me feel like Brian said, like cringy. But now as I've gotten older, I've just kind of like, oh, well, thank you. We appreciate you. And that's typically what I say in kind is we appreciate you. That's what I find pretty helpful.
Daniel, what's your take?
I usually just tell folks, it don't bother me. And I figure most folks, it is coming from a good place, but I just remind them that the truth of my time in was that I was a poor kid from a poor family in the South. I need to get the fuck out. So that was my out. It was, people in my family dealt with our situation differently. Some went to prison. I went to the military, and it was my place to get a foothold in life. So I didn't see any I didn't have like dreams of crying eagles or anything when I signed up. It was just, this was my means to get out of here. But I originally just remind folks, I was like, the best way to actually thank people for their service is at the ballot box. Consider what they're voting for, and vote for things or people that will help us and keep us out of these shitty situations.
Okay. Well, so I come from that time in American conflict that people often point out and say, gee, we sure screwed that up. So there are a couple of things that come to mind. First is, don't thank me for my service. Thank me for the fact you don't fucking have to. Because the reality is, especially now, we are an all-volunteer military. So everyone that has raised their hand in post-Vietnam, post-draft, has made it possible for you not to. Right? That's the reality, is that nobody's forcing you to serve. So those who have stepped up and raised their hand and taken that oath have made it possible for you not to have to serve, or your mom or your dad not to have to serve, that they have made it possible for you to have a roof over your head, food in your belly, and not have to worry about having to serve. And so first off, thank them for the fact that you don't have to. Secondly, as a Vietnam vet, when people say, when they find out that I was in the military and that I served, and they thank me for my service, there's a voice in my head that says, well, where the fuck were you? When I came home, where the hell was your fucking thank you then? Now, I didn't get spit on, and I joined the anti-war movement because I wasn't necessarily crazy about the war to start with. My story is, in the time of Vietnam, you were often found yourself in front of a judge. From my background, a poor working class kid, who said, you got a choice, son. You can go to jail or you can go join the military. And I said, thank you very much. I joined the military. Now that was in 1966. Vietnam was not a big deal at that time. Had it been different, I don't know that I'd have made that choice, but I don't regret the fact that I did. Because there's an experience that I have that tells me a lot about who I am as a human being. And it tells me a lot about what humanity should be versus what I saw. And so for me, that's the thing. So thank me for my service. Yeah, I get it. You're all feeling fucking guilty and you don't want to be feeling bad anymore. But the reality is that I'd much rather than thanking me for my service, go volunteer at the VA. Right. Go to the VA health center in your local neighborhood and ask them what you can do to help. Do something about homeless vets that are on the street. Do something about the fact that once you're out of the military, they don't give a fuck about who and what you are anymore. And that's the reality. So, the thing is when I was a teacher and I eventually started talking to classes about my service in Vietnam, I said, there's nothing wrong with military service. We have a debt for those who have gone before us and paid the price so that we can live the lives we live. There's nothing that is dishonorable about service. But you need to understand what the military is going to ask of you, especially those of us who served in those forces that saw conflict in person on a more immediate level. And that is they're going to take who and what you are as a human being, and they're going to strip it away, and they're going to turn you into what they need you to be in order to survive a conflict. And then when they cut your ass loose, they're not going to turn you back into the human being you were. That's on you. And so you want to do something to thank vets, do something that makes their lives better so that they don't have to go through that kind of shit on their own. That's my take on it.
It dovetails rather well into the next question, Lonnie. As this has become more of a thing to say, thank you for your service, do you feel like it's a cop-out for a lot of civilians just to say something like the thoughts and prayers, or I put a special border around my Facebook picture?
Again, I'm going to let the others go because I could talk about this shit forever, but
I get that. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a kind of a thoughts and prayers thing. But again, I think if the choice is that or, baby killer, then, it's probably better. The fake ass, thank you for your service. That's probably better.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just maybe they just don't know what else to say, and they just want to say something supportive and let you know that they're okay with what you did and they support you. And
yeah,
but they really don't have any other words. They just don't know what else to say. So they just default to that all the time. So
yeah, I agree with Ed's position. I've actually asked the questions like, okay, why do you feel the need to say thank you for your service? I mean, to me, that's again comes across as, hey, like big fucking deal, and it really is about that. They just they should say something, but they just don't know. So thank you for your service.
Go, guys.
Oh, go ahead, Lonnie.
No, go, Nate, go.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I mean, it's just like with the on social media, like the 22 a day push-up thing is viral going around. My thing is, hey, why not just be an ear to listen to, and instead of doing all that, because the same people that will turn around and be like, hey, I'm too busy when somebody calls them and say, hey, I'm in a dark place or something like that right now. But they're the same people to tell them, oh no, like I know now it's going around. You see the meme going around of where, it's like one panel, someone's calling somebody because they're in a dark place. And then the person answers, they said they're too busy. And then the next image, they're, doing push-ups, the 22 a day push-up thing. And, that's something that's always kind of got my ire up a bit. And vets are guilty of this too. And I mean, I'm guilty of it also, but there's nothing wrong with taking time for yourself. But, when somebody calls you, it's like, hey man, they're calling you for a reason. Maybe you should listen to what they're calling you about. And I know I've had my former Joes call me, it'll be sometimes 2 a.m. they call me and they're like, hey man, I'm in a really bad spot right now. And it's like, hey, you know what, whatever I'm doing, I stop doing what I'm doing and that goes on hold and I listen. Because a lot of times, they just want to hear somebody listen and listen to what they're saying. So I guess for a lot of people that are putting those images up or doing that 22 a day thing, volunteer at a suicide, uh, you know, uh, resistance phone line, or or maybe even on social media, because they have different social media programs like what was it, the vets buddy one, where if you message them, if you're having a hard time, they'll respond to you. That's a really good one too. I can't remember the name of it at the moment. I'll have to look it up. Oh, Vets in Distress. That's what it is.
Anybody else want to jump in on this one?
Honestly, I just get annoyed when people would tag me in that 22 or just like people that didn't serve would tag me in this and expect me to do 22 push-ups. And I'm like, motherfucker, you see, I'm going to Krav 4 days a week, and my wife's got me going to Pilates the other 3 days a week. And like, I did enough push-ups. Like, you do your own push-ups.
The 22 push-ups thing is cringe. That's, yeah.
I mean, I listen to someone, I'll pick up the phone, but damn.
Yeah, I'm done with the push-ups too.
Yeah. So, yeah, let me think. If I can say this in any way, shape, or form that is productive, as opposed to telling you all to go fuck yourself. The thing is if you want to, if you're doing something because you feel guilty because you didn't serve, I'm sorry, go someplace else. Really, go do something else. I don't need you feeling guilty. I don't need you feeling sympathy for me necessarily. I don't need that. What I really need, and what I think all of us need, is to get as much of ourselves back as we possibly can. And anything that can be done to help that is fine. But putting a little banner around your name, or posting up a picture of, watching a veterans parade or whatever, that shit don't mean anything. It really doesn't. I get it. You want to be a patriot. Fine, be a patriot. But the true patriots aren't the ones that are putting shit around their name, right? They're the people that are doing the work down in the trenches, so to speak. They're the people that, go to a VA hospital and watch those people bust their ass trying to make things work for guys. Go to a rehab facility. The Marines have this great rehab facility down at Pendleton that they run down there. Go see if you can volunteer doing something like that. Go see what you can do to help. But please don't throw a challenge out there like, it's some kind of a, attaboy for you, because your attaboys don't mean shit to me. Again, I hate coming off as the angry Vietnam vet, but this kind of shit drives me crazy, and I bite my tongue all the time because I'm tired of screaming fuck at people for doing stupid shit. That's all there is to it. I did that whole thing. I came back when I moved to Northern California. I worked with an organization called the Flower of the Dragon. And basically what we did is we ran around trying to keep vets from killing themselves or doing stupid shit and finding work for them. And all it was a bunch of Vietnam vets, and nobody wanted shit to do with us because we were the scary fuckers that came back, and we were the baby killers, and we were all that shit. And so, I did that, and I'm at the point now where it's time for people to realize that what we need, what every veteran needs, is an opportunity to come home. And I'm not talking about getting out of the service kind of coming home. There is a long road that many of us take when we come back from whatever service we had. Some of it's easier, some of it's not. And I will never, ever discount somebody else's service and the road that they battle, whether they were in conflict or not. Because to be in the military requires you to give up a whole bunch of who and what you are. And that road is not easy to come home to. and very few people really understand what it is. And those of us who have served get that, right? We understand what our brothers and our sisters have gone through to make their way back home and to try and live the best life they can. What keeps me pushing every day is that there are 59,000 fucking names on a wall in which 23 of them belong to people that I know. And my job is to live the best life I can possibly live to honor their sacrifice. That's what I do. That's what keeps me going every fucking day. And so put your banner on your picture if you want, but don't expect me to pat you on the back for it. Now shut up.
So we'll have to remind Ed to put a R rating on this stream because of the language, which is fine. We're all adults here.
I mean,
It's already marked not for children. I knew Lonnie was going to be here.
We do have a lot of questions, and I just want to take a real quick pause to let everybody know that we're going to have another set of veterans here next week. So some of these questions will be duplicated, and the ones that we don't get to tonight we'll do next week as well. But when we were asking about the thanking you for your service, Brian said to ask people their story or take the time to educate yourself or your youngsters about military service. Somebody commented that they're afraid to ask stories in case it triggers, and then some other people made comments about that as well. So I just want to say, what's the best way to approach it? Like how can we ask you or let you know that it's okay to share with us?
Okay, I'm going to take that one first.
Sure.
Then I'll let you all go. So first off, for me, don't ask me my story unless you and I have a relationship, because then it just feels like you want to be entertained. That you want to, it's kind of like watching one of the old World War II or Korean War movies, and you want to vicariously have that experience without any of the risk. So don't ask me about my story until you have a relationship with me. And if you don't have a relationship with a vet, the last thing you want to do is your first interaction is, well, why don't you tell me what it's like? Because first off, there's no fucking way we can tell you what it was like, depending on what our time of service was, right? If we were in conflict, there is no fucking way that you're ever going to understand what that was like. And so asking me to tell my story and tell you what it was like ain't going to work. But if you have a relationship with me and there's a sense of trust that you're willing to sit there and hear it and understand that, one, you don't have to apologize to me. You don't have to feel sympathy for me. What you have to do is understand that what you asked for is what it was like for me. And I'm going to tell you the best I can, but it's not going to be pretty, and I'm not going to edit it for you. So I think the thing is before you ask somebody to tell you their story, even with a relationship, damn sure make sure you're ready to hear it. Because if you're not ready to hear it and you do that blank stare, zone out look, you just lost me. And you just lost any vet that ever has a story to tell. And that's my take on it. Go, guys.
Yeah, I guess I'll go next. I got to agree with Lonnie on this one, because people have a thing about, they commoditize, suffering, right? They don't want to hear about the day that we went out on patrol and everything went well. They want to hear about the days we went out and we got blown up or we got hurt, right? So that's why we open up generally to people that we trust. And when we trust you, that's like, hey man, we're putting our lives in your hand, essentially. And I've had times people, you're like, you know what, I don't want to hear anymore or whatever, or, you know what, don't ever tell me anything like this ever again. And that's really hurtful, because I'm opening up to you, telling you my experiences of what I went through that hurt me, and for people to do that, to shut you down, is really hurtful. Another thing is, don't assume that we all killed people or interrupt it and say, oh, did you kill people, right? And this goes for people that we don't know and people that we are close to as well. It's like, look, dude, this is not something you just generally lackadaisically ask somebody, you know, regardless of how well you knew them. You know, if they want to talk to you about it, they'll talk to you about it. You know, don't just assume that we're all doing that. And that's definitely a problematic thing that I've found with people in my family. But it's like when I start telling them what happened, then all of a sudden it's too much, right? Because that's what I was saying. They commoditize that suffering, right? Because people don't want to hear about it when we just had a good day, when everything went well on patrol. We went out on patrol, we came back in, ate chow, went to bed. Nobody wants to hear that. They want to hear about when, you know, the bridge over the River Kwai, right? They want to see and hear the action film, you know, and that's really frustrating at times. And I get it, but it's frustrating. And another thing I did want to add, another great place to volunteer is the vet centers. Really awesome place. I've been going to the vet center for the last 4 or 5 years. I absolutely love it. The volunteers there are awesome. So if you're also looking for a place to volunteer, that's a really good place too.
Can we go to Brian next, since he was the one who suggested it?
Yeah, Brian, go.
Yep. I guess it's, for me, it's situational. I'm an Air Force guy, space guy, so I don't have the in-your-face combat experience. My experience was different, about as different as it can get. For instance, one of my jobs in the Air Force was to be something called a missileer. Basically, I sat in a hole in northern Montana for 24 to 72 hours on a bad shift at a time, basically waiting for somebody to splash me a message saying, okay, you got to launch 10 missiles at people on halfway around the globe. In 30 minutes, you're going to kill millions of people. So that's just one of my things. I mean, I've done some other things as well, but none of the in-your-face stuff that people like Lonny or Ed might have done. So I guess, yes, ask people to tell you their story, but don't look at it as entertainment or patronizing. Just make those veterans feel valued. I guess that's what I'm getting at. Don't patronize. It's like, hey, okay, how many people did you shoot in the face? We want to know that. No, don't do that. It's all about letting them know, hey, they were appreciated without being trite. They're valued, and we care about you guys. So that's really my thing. And again, every vet is going to be a little different. Some will just yabber on for hours. Others, they're like, you know what? I can't talk about this because it's too raw. And if you get that, understand and just kind of just kind of back off. Don't be insistent about it, but learn how to read that vet, for lack of a better term, and act accordingly. Over.
Anybody
Does
else?
anybody else want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I could say a few words on that too. I mean, I agree also with you, Lonny, you know, going back to that, you know, anytime somebody asks me that, and they do, you know, all the time out of the blue, they want to know, oh, you were in the Marines, or tell me about this, that. I just try to, you know, if it's somebody like you said, I don't have a relationship with, that's really awkward for me. I'm not going to open up and tell you anything. I just try to keep it short and boring and make them kind of go away. You know, that's kind of what I do. Oh, I did this. Wasn't that exciting. That's the end. And I'm done. So it's that's how I do it. Over.
Anybody else? Cool. Yeah, I think the whole story thing is weird. I didn't actually start talking about my time in Vietnam in any way, shape, or form until probably 2004. I got out of, well, so I was discharged in 1970. And so from 1970 until 2004, 2005, the only people I ever talked to about my time in the military were other non-vets. And usually it wasn't about the shit. Usually it was about the good times, the times that we all came home, the times that we sat down and drank a beer and listened to some music, you know, or just hung out and we're back in base camp and, you know, feeling like, okay, there's another day and we're here. You know, so other than that, until 2004, I really didn't talk about it. And I became a high school teacher in 2003. And I got asked by one of the English teachers who taught AP literature. They read a book called The Things They Carried, and asked me if I was willing to come in and talk to them about the book. And I said, sure. But you know, it's going to be unfiltered. And it's going to be based on my particular experience. And they all need to understand that my story is not every veteran's story. It's not every Vietnam veteran's story. It sure as hell doesn't even come close. And that there are a few questions they could not ask. And I didn't have to say what that was. And the other thing I told them they needed to understand is that for me to actually open up, I was going to have to cry. You know, I was going to have to mourn, and I was going to have to go through the feelings that I stuffed away for many years in order to be able to be honest with them at the same time and discuss their reading and what their take was from it versus my experience in that. If you've never read the book, it's an interesting book. It's a basically allegories. It's a story about his story. The guy that wrote the book was a combat vet, but he wrote stories about his story. So you know, it's like one of those wonderful allegories that people get. But yeah, I just, that's the thing. It takes us, and I agree, you know, with everybody. It takes time, you know, to kind of get there, you know, and so I think you have to be careful when you ask about those stories. I mean, my father served in the Second World War. He served with Patton's army, and to the day he died, and he died young, he never ever talked to me about his time in the military. Just never. He could just not go there. And I understand it. First off, being a Jewish man in the Second World War was a pretty heavy duty thing. And then he did all of his basic training was in the South in the 40s, you know, so being Jewish and being from New York, he did not do well in the South in the military. But he did not talk about his time actually in conflict. And to the day he died, I have no idea. I just know that he was there. And that's kind of like, I think a lot of us who have been in direct conflict, it takes us a while, and it takes a whole bunch of trust to get there. And I agree with Nate, you know, it's like nobody wants to hear the good stuff. Nobody wants to hear the happy part of it, right? They all want to hear the blood and guts and gore of it. Kind of reminds me of Alice's Restaurant, the song that Arlo Guthrie sang, where you know he's in the draft center and he's with the doctor and he's jumping up and down. He says, you know, Doc, I want to kill, I want blood and guts and gore between my teeth. You know, and I think often people, that's what they're looking for, and that's the piece that we most likely don't want to talk a whole lot about. But that's, again, you know, it's being careful about who you talk to and about what you talk about, and don't approach it lightly, and don't approach it in any kind of casual manner. This is, it's not for entertainment. If you want to know, then be ready to hear it. And once you bite off that piece, don't you dare fucking back off, you know. Because that's a betrayal that we really just don't need. And that's it for me.
I want to, we're approaching the 5:30 mark. I just want to see, do any of you guys have to go, or can we go a little long?
Hey,
Okay.
I have to punch out at the bottom of the hour, but don't stop on my account.
Okay.
They're firearms related Zoom cover all things.
Okay.
So yeah.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate your hanging with us too.
Thank you. We should talk more.
Oh yeah.
I think
hell,
Kyle has
I
our.
sent a friend request. You haven't answered it.
Oh, as soon as I get,
There was another question here that was put up, but Ed had mentioned that he wanted to segue to something else off of this instead of going on with the next question in line. There's all these comments we've been making about what you can do with regards to helping out veterans in your life, or even not ones that are directly in your life. The veteran suicide statistic is horrible. And where did it go? Ed, my apologies. The question just disappeared off my screen.
You got right to the punchline and you let everybody hang, Kyle.
My apologies.
Yeah.
It was, are there programs you recommend that folks can volunteer with or donate to that will actually make a difference?
Walk the Talk America. Contact
What was that?
Walk the Talk America. It's an organization that basically deals with suicide. A lot of the people they deal with are veterans, and I know that Walk the Talk America has done some stuff there. I think that the saddest statistic about suicide isn't just the veteran suicide, but the number of active military that have been committing suicide lately is just unbelievable. And I know, that number 22 every day is there. The reality is that 22 encompasses not just current conflict veterans, but it covers veterans from the Vietnam conflict through Bosnia Herzegovina, the African conflicts. So it's not just current conflict veterans. So it's still a horrific thing. It reminds me that in the mid 70s, roughly 2/3 of the penal population in the United States were Vietnam veterans. So just to give you an idea of the effect that happens there. So yeah, I think Walk the Talk America. Be really careful about what organizations you decide to get involved with and contribute to. Do your research. I'm not going to call out any one particular one, but there are several out there that make a huge amount of money off of basically pimping on veterans and veterans' needs, and pay huge amounts of salaries to their executives, and don't do a whole lot except for pass out a blanket and tell you what a good person you are. And I'll leave it at that.
I'll second your throwing Walk the Talk America out there. The guy that runs it, Michael Sodini, great guy. He's actually showed up at a Liberal Gun Club annual meeting and spoken to the group and to everyone. So he shows up. He knows a lot of people in LGC now. Awesome guy, great organization. So yeah, definitely. I'll second that one.
Yeah. There are a lot of organizations out there. Just, you got to do some investigation. Just don't jump on the bandwagon just because it sounds like they do good things. I'd be looking at some of the organizations that deal with homelessness, especially veteran homelessness. There are a lot of them out there. Almost every major city has somebody that's involved in housing homeless veterans and providing services that aren't necessarily given by the VA.
I'll just chime in with pretty much every city in America, every small town in America has a hall or a church somewhere that holds AA meetings. They could use a few bucks.
Yeah. Alcohol and drugs is a big issue for many.
Very few people commit suicide who also aren't heavily in the bottle or pills or some combination. So, I mean, it's all related.
Anything else? Because we can keep going if there are questions that you feel would be good to deal with now.
Yeah, we have another one.
This is getting into lighter topics. We have a question from currently serving airmen from 88 to now. So in a while. Thoughts on allowing service members carry on post when it comes to actually carrying?
I saw that one pop up and I was like, oh, I have thoughts. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, I served 93 to 96, peacetime. I was stationed in Germany. If any of y'all ever did any time there, you know what that means. So I have peacetime war stories. And the idea of any of us having our own firearms available is horrifying. Holy shit. No, 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 no. No way. Because we fought each other all the time.
Yep.
All the time. In the barracks, downrange at the bars, at the NCO club. I mean, the parking lot at AFES. Like, we were some fighting motherfuckers all the time. We fought for sport. And if any of us would have had access to firearms, bad news. No, 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 no. Now, like an NCO who's married and lives off post and has his shit wired together, you know, that's a different thing. But at least as far as single soldiers in the barracks, horrible idea.
We had a
Not that good
Thunderdome.
of an idea, just on duty ever.
Yep. Yeah, we had Thunderdome stenciled across our berthing, or the entrance to our berthing on the ship. And they got used.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, guns all over base like that too many young people, emotions, drunkenness, fighting all the time. We did the same thing on, you can imagine on a Marine base, right? All those, young people trained to fight and they want to do it, So yeah, it's that'd be a bad situation. I spent a little time on base, as an MP, and we didn't bring our guns home at night. We checked them in and checked them out at the PMO office, and that's where they stayed in the armory. Just because you were an MP, you didn't take your guns with you back to your barracks room or your house. But yeah, that's bad idea for all those young people to have guns on base, for sure.
I don't know, because I'm not a current conflict veteran, but I can tell you that having a bunch of people around you with guns in conflict can be pretty goddamn hairy if you get pissed off. You go out, you tie a little something on, you come back, somebody says the wrong thing, and next thing you know, you just stitched your buddy. So the idea of in a peacetime military where you're already kind of pissy because people are telling you to do shit you don't really feel like you want to do, and it doesn't take much for somebody to piss you off. Man, having a fucking gun, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
That's kind of like arming teachers, it's like bad idea, really bad idea.
Yeah, if you wanted to have more security on a base, then maybe people that are on duty, certain people could carry a gun. Certain people do already, but you can, do more of that maybe. But I don't know. That's a whole different topic and rabbit hole to go down. But yeah, you should.
Yeah. Other people who haven't served may not realize is just because you wear a uniform doesn't mean you know what the hell you're doing with a gun.
Yep.
So you got to understand that. Like I said, I think in my uniform, I touched a gun maybe a handful of times. That was just to qualify to. That's like, okay, yes, you can hit the broadside of a barn. You're good to go. And it's just, and I've also seen some stuff. I mean, Air Force, we're supposed to be the well-behaved guys, and I've seen some dumb shit. So to me, it's just like, why? Yeah, just don't. I mean, this is why we have security forces, air police, I guess what they would call it in Lonnie's time. But yeah, this is why we've got these folks, and it seems like you're just looking for it's a solution that's looking for a problem.
I think a lot of folks too, outside of the military, and hell, even myself, just being a dumb kid going into boot camp, you get the idea that being in will give you this, it's going to be this crucible where you get this deep discipline that you never knew you had within you or what have you. And the sad reality of boot camp was just that there are people that can't fold a fucking shirt, no matter, how many times they're showing how to fold this damn shirt. And then you all got to suffer for it. So you just kind of realize that, yeah, well, maybe I'm not as dumb as my stepdad said, but the bar wasn't really set that high. So just a lot of folks I don't think know that. So there were a lot of people that I served with, and I wouldn't want them anywhere near a gun just because they would just act a fool.
So this kind of segues well into our next series of questions. I kind of merged a few together because I think that when you talk about one, you'll talk about all of them. So if you want to just pick out one of these that resonates with you and answer it. We often hear that being in the military doesn't teach you much about guns, and then just as often we hear the opposite. Which you guys have kind of touched on a little bit. So somebody was asking which one is it? And then along with that, does the military experience change your perception of firearms as tools? And what firearms training that you received was deficient or left out? Like what could have been improved? What would have made your job easier? Like what did they not teach you that you needed? So any of that you want to touch on?
Again, it depends on what the job is in the military. Got some who are, like, for instance, a Marine Corps infantryman. That is their tool, or an Army infantryman. And then you got somebody like in the Air Force who works in the dental clinic. I mean, what the hell are they going to do with a gun? So it really does depend on what your job is. And not everybody needs to learn how to hit a bullseye at 100 yards with an M16. So it really just depends. The military is by no means a monolith.
Go ahead.
MOS. I mean, it's all the difference in the world. I was in a line platoon, qualified Deuce, 249, 16, grease gun, M9, and we were at the range like either every month or like a couple of times a month. And I got to shoot G3s and work with foreign armies, and I got to pull a ton of peacetime trigger pulling. So yeah, I had lots of hands-on. The one giant deficiency was handguns. It was cup and saucer. It was cup and saucer, 90s style. But other than that, my rifle training was badass. And I get that a lot. Oh, well, Army rifle, whatever. Well, Fort Leonard Wood, combat engineers, we could shoot rifles. Like, it was a thing.
Yeah, I think, go ahead, Nate.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, like Will was saying and Brian and everyone was saying, it depends on your job. For instance, in the military, at least for me, I could always tell what somebody's job was pretty much just by the way they slung their rifle. Sometimes people sling it behind their back. Sometimes people carry it like a purse, right? For me, I always carry it at the low ready. I'm sorry, it's like I said, I came in as a motor transport operator. But, you know, I was quickly sent to infantry line platoon where they weeded that out of me really quick. You know, it was like, no, you always carry your weapon up a low ready. You always are ready to go. You never carry your weapon like a purse. You never sling your weapon behind your back, because how are you going to get to your weapon? So, you know, it was some of that stuff where it's like, now it's like I could be walking around seeing other people with their weapons slung behind their back, and I'm like, yep, you're a pogue. Oh, you're a pogue. Yeah, you know, because you can tell by the way they carry their weapon, or by how proficient they are with them, whether it's breaking it down to anything else. Um, as far as proficiency and firearms training, I think definitely one thing that we could have done more on is stress shooting. You know, like actually like you run in full boots and utes to your weapon, get down the prone and start shooting or something. I've only done that a few handful of times. I did it a lot more in the air marshals than I did in the military. And I found that to be one of the most proficient way, you know, because otherwise static shooting is easy. You know, static is so easy, but when you need to be on the move and actually shooting, moving, communicating, I know that can be scary for a lot of people, you know, but it's really fun and some of the best training that you'll get. Other deficiencies that we get, especially in combat situations, is you know, like people don't really tell you how hard it really is to apply sports, you know, and remedial action to your weapon when your weapon's all jammed up with sand because you've been out on patrol for so long and your stuff's gunked up because of the CLP or whatever you're using gunked your weapon up. And now, oh dang, I gotta apply remedial action. I gotta rip this magazine out, and no one's telling you how hard it really is when it's like when it's go time. You know, especially how much it sucks when you raise your rifle up and it just goes click and not bang. That's like one of the worst feelings you're ever gonna get. You know, that's one of those feelings that your heart stops for a second. But you know, I mean, they tell you all the time, but I don't know if there's any training they can really do to prepare you for that other than to throw in the dummy rounds, right? But even when they throw in the dummy rounds for remediation drills, there's still issues with that too, because you're not going to get that same experience of when that magazine is stuck inside that magazine well and you just can't pull it out. You know, that's when it's like, that's a real pucker factor, as they say, because now you're just like, oh crap, I can't get this mag out. So what, you go to your secondary, oh, that's jammed up. You know, it's like they teach you weapons maintenance, but they don't teach you weapons maintenance general to the location that you're at. It's just a generalized weapons maintenance. You know, because I'm sure for Lonnie is different for how it was for me when I was in the desert. You know, because the desert is a completely different environment. So it's like you don't apply liberal amounts of CLP, you just put a thin coat on. But they're not telling you that. You know, they're always like, oh, you know, grease that baby up, let's go. No, don't ever do that. You know, some people don't even do it. They just dry fire and they just hock a loogie in their ejection port and go. You know, and use that as lube sometimes, just because how CLP just turns to gunk with sand and dust in it. So just, you know, food for thought. But that's some of the training that I think would be better.
Yeah, I think so. For me, you know, from talking to some of the kids that joined the military when I was teaching and came back and we would talk, training changed a lot from Vietnam to the current situation. So a lot of the stuff that I went through, so we had a live fire piece where, you know, you were basically low crawling underneath barbed wire while somebody's dumping M60 rounds over your head, you know, to get you used to the fact that that's what you had to be able to do. And then we also, in part of our quals, is we actually walked a path with pop-up targets. And so, you know, you'd be walking along again, low ready. And this was an M14, by the way. This was not an M16. And you know, the thing is you know, this thing would pop up and it would either be a low profile target or a standing target, didn't matter. And you had to either take a knee or squat down or grab cover or go prone, and then take your shot. And you only had so much time to do it because then the target would drop back down. We went through training with oddly enough, with Daisy BB rifles, and we learned how to do point and shoot. No aim. You just, they give you this, there was this little rack of tiny little silhouettes, right? About, you know, 3 or 4 feet in front of you, and they'd pop up, and then you'd have to sit there and rack it like a lever action, right? And then underneath your chin, you know, or close to it, you point it in the direction and try and knock the silhouettes down. So we had a lot of thorough training in terms of handling a rifle. I shot a 45 once for quals, at a 15-yard target. And let me tell you, the 1911 45s that the military had were just blown to shit for training. So if you could hit something with it at all, you were doing goddamn good. But I think my training was a lot different than current training is. I know that when my daughter went through the Air Force training in Lackland, I think she picked up an M16 once, and that was it. But she was flight crew, she was a load master. How many fucking times are you going to need a rifle if you're flying the tail end of a 130 or on the tail end of a stratolifter, right? Doesn't really matter. So I'm kind of like Brian and what Nate and Will said, which is really depends on what your job is, what your MOS is. I do know that when I was in Marines that I talked to, every Marine is considered a basic infantryman, regardless of what their job was at the time. And so they all got pretty good rifle training. They didn't do a whole lot of other stuff unless they wound up in a company that used different armament, and then they learned that stuff once they got there. So yeah, I wouldn't say my training was deficient, but I wasn't. At no time was I expected to be able to hit a bullseye with anything, because my job and the job of any other infantryman in Vietnam was to lay down suppressive fire and move. And when you lay down suppressive fire, basically you're just dumping mags, right? You're pointing that sucker in a general direction and you're dumping mags and you're moving, because you don't want to be a stationary target. You don't want to have to be hunkered down. And then, like Nate said, and this is a problem I have today. I tend to run my ARs drier than most people do. Because not only just the mud and shit, but during the hot times, a lot of Vietnam is made up of red sand and clay, and it blows all over the place. And so, I tended to run mine a little drier than probably most people would think an AR should run at. The environment has a lot to do with it. If you're in a high humidity area and there's not a whole lot of gunk and shit that gets in it, then you may want to run it a little differently.
I guess it's my turn to chime in here now. But the time I served in the mid 90s to the early 2000s in the Marine Corps was still doing that. Every Marine is a marksman or a rifleman. They kind of lived by that. I don't know if they're still doing that now, probably to some extent. But every Marine, you can't even graduate boot camp and you'll get washed back if you can't qualify in the rifle range, even at 500 yards as just a basic marksman, low level. So they won't even let you go, become a Marine, right? You'll go home if you can't shoot. So, but even after boot camp, no matter what your job was in the Marine Corps, cook, mechanic, everything, everybody went to about a 30-day basic combat infantry training. Didn't matter what your job was. You got combat infantry training for a month. You lived in the field. You shot machine guns, grenade launchers, the rocket launchers, all that stuff. Everybody had all that training. Didn't matter what you did. But, different story once you got to the fleet. You're in the fleet, and then it was, you're doing your day job, whatever that would be. And then you're only qualifying once or twice a year on either an M9 or an M16A2 is kind of what we had back then, but that was it really. But deficiency, I'll agree with Will on the pistol training. That was not like, they were just like, here's an M9, here's how you load it, and there's the targets. And I shot, we have 3 levels of qualification in the Marine Corps. You got your marksman, sharpshooter, and expert. And I was an expert every time with the rifle because we had plenty of training. But with that M9, I was what they call the pizza box, the marksman, the little square box on my chest. And I had no training. They're just like, here you go.
We actually, when I became a 113 driver, and so at that, like when I became a 113 driver, at that time, the drivers all carried a 9, and we like returned our 16. And then for whatever reason, it got decided. I carried the M9 for like 2 months, and then it was decided rack all of the 9s all the time. Only the officers will carry an M9, and otherwise they stay in the armory. And they gave me an M16 again, and so then I had to learn how to crawl out of a hatch with a 16 with an A2. But it was just decided that that was not going to be the way anymore. It was like, for what we do, we don't need pistols. Either have a rifle or just don't, It's weird. But yeah, it was just, here's the M9, here's how you put it, and then shoot that thing over there. I mean, there was no instruction at all. And same thing, I qualified sharpshooter, but like barely.
That's funny.
Okay. Anything else, Danny? Kyle?
We have the final question, and we're basing this off a comment that you made earlier. And I think we're going to go with Brian first, because I think he actually has a timeline where he has to get out. Earlier, Lonny, you mentioned that you love shooting the Ma Deuce, right? 50 cal, butterfly trigger and whatnot. Does anyone have similar experiences they'd like to share about a favorite firearm-related service or not? Preferably service, of course, since that's what we're talking about. And Brian, take it away.
Yeah, like I said, I have very little firearms experience in service. I mean, again, they let me touch a gun maybe 3, 4, 5 times over my years in uniform, and that's about it. So my favorite firearms are the ones I have sitting in my gun safe right now. My AR, my 2 Glocks, and my Mossberg 500. So I like to tell people I am never going to be that guy who has a wall full of guns, John Wick style. I am going to be that guy who, for the few guns he has, knows them backwards and forwards and can shoot the hell out of them. So that's just Brian.
Perfect. And who's next?
I'll go again. I've gotten asked that question a bunch. What's your favorite gun you ever shot, or the coolest thing you ever shot? And that's easy for me. Every time I get asked that question, I always go back to the Mark 19. It's a fully automatic grenade launcher, tripod. You got to sandbag it down because that thing moves when you shoot it. It's got the butterfly trigger, just like the Ma Deuce. And, you do like a 3-round burst, and those grenades come out of there, and you can watch them fly down range and hit your target. It's so cool. It's just the best for me. I love shooting that. I wish I got to shoot it more, but that's my story.
Ma Deuce. Ma Deuce. Yes. I was like I said, a 113 driver. So I had to qualify on it all the time and was lucky. And, but yeah, I had to be able to get up there and get on the gun if my TC got taken out or whatever. So I got a pretty fair amount of time on Ma Deuce, and I was my unit was attached to a cav unit, and so we would run out and play with the Bradleys, and so I'd get up there and put rounds down range while they were qualing with the Bradleys, and so do like simulated live fire / qualification, and good stuff, good fun. And nobody was shooting back, so that makes it a lot more pleasant.
Yeah.
Nate?
Yeah, I got a lot of love for the 50, got a lot of love for the Mark 19, but I'm actually going to go with the M60's little brother, the 240. Because after the M60 came the 240, and I love the 240. Honestly, I'm surgical with that thing. I used it, in combat. I used it, in training, at gunnery, all these different places I've used it. And I love the 240. It's just, I didn't think I would like it as much, especially, once you start using the 50 cal or the Mark 19. But I tell you, man, the 240, that thing is just, it's reliable. That's one of the things I really like about it. Like in combat, no matter how dirty and nasty that thing was going, it was just like, it just ran like butter. It didn't matter. it just whenever I needed it to go, it went. You know, no jams, no nothing, no kinks in the chain or nothing. It just kept going. And so I always, you know, that forever that'll probably be that's gonna be my girl right there.
Daniel, you have a favorite?
From my time in, all we ever shot was was in boot camp. We shot the like 1911s that were converted to shoot 22s. And then when I went to ComCam, we had one day we were supposed to go do rifle quals, and they didn't have money for ammunition, so we didn't. Maybe they taught us firefighting. That was really it. Shipboard. My favorite of what I own is that, or my Scout. But
Oh yeah.
But other than that, yeah, I can't really claim any sort of badass points from my time in the Navy. It was just a mundane government job, I guess, where I chased tail. But that's what I did with it.
So as I said, the 50 was probably, you know, one of the big kicks. But I got to tell you, I was doing an evac run, and I was sitting in with the door gunner, and he let me use his minigun. And I'm gonna tell you, if you want to kick, that minigun is a kick. I understand that in Vegas there is a place where you can actually go and they have one.
Yeah, Battlefield Vegas, been there.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you something, man. You know, for whatever it's worth, if you ever want to if you want to put a grin on your face, go spend the money, because it ain't cheap. Go spend the money.
What it's got to cost now?
Yeah, go spend the money. But I have to tell you, other than the Modus, that mini was just holy shit. At night, when that sucker cuts loose, now there's a tracer round that they space out on minis. And I got to tell you, it looks like you're driving. It's looked like the pictures of the freeway when cars are going away from you, and all you see is taillights. That's how fast that sucker shoots, and it's just unreal. And it also makes aiming it really nice, because the tracers kind of pave your way. So yeah, you know, that'll put a real grin on your face for nothing else. In my day, the M60 was the common infantry carry. And they're kind of fun, but they had a tendency to get a little weird, especially when the barrel got hot. They didn't like it. 7.62 coming out at rapid fire like that, it has a tendency to create some serious heat. But yeah, those probably the Mini and the Modus. That's probably my favorites.
All right. Well, I want to thank all of you for sharing with us and being here. There's a lot of great comments in both of the Facebook threads if you guys want to go look at them and see the appreciation. I want to let the audience know that next week we're going to continue this. We're going to have some female veterans. So if your question did not get addressed, we are saving that for next week. That is already up on the website if you want to go register for it. And the email reminders will go out tomorrow about it. So thank you, gentlemen.
Can I just jump in here real quick? And I just really want to thank all of you for your service.
I knew somebody was going to do that.
You know, it was gonna be me. I was gonna thank you for being here. To echo Danny, thank you, gentlemen, for sharing tonight, and we look forward to next week. This will be up on YouTube. If the live stream doesn't stay up there, it'll be up. I'll try to get up later tonight. And one quick shout out to the Sapper gentleman there in the lower left-hand corner for his. He's got a bunch of really great videos on his YouTube channel, so we'll make sure we drop a link there so we give him a little love.
Go subscribe.
Subscribe and click the bell. And what's the spiel, Will? You gotta go click the bell and get the alerts. I don't know.
Yeah, you get the thing and the stuff and the like and subscribe and Patreon and the whatever and all that. And yeah.
But
thank you very much.
We appreciate you guys being here and taking the time out of your day and putting up with Lonnie talking all the time. And we'll see you next week. So if you are inclined, we generally hang out on the Discord server in the pub, and Lonnie can talk some more there. And we can have a good night. Otherwise, we'll see everybody next week. And I think